Welcome. You're listening to Guiding Stars in the Jeffrey Wolfe Green School of Evolutionary Astrology. This is your host, Kristin Fontana, and I'm here with Stacie Pazura and a team of expert evolutionary astrologers to discuss the archetype of Pisces, Neptune, and the 12th house, and how it is expressed naturally. So I'd like to show you our panel for today. All right, we're going to start with Marty Dixon, followed by Deva Green. We're hoping Patricia will join us. If not, we will cover her planets. We've got Helena Garcia and Ari Moshe Wolfe. Very excited about this webinar today as we complete our series. Hey, Stacie, are you there? Hello.
Yes, I am.
Here's my cohort here, and Stacey's got that strong Pisces moon, so she'll be having plenty to share. All right, so we've come all the way around the zodiac. We've gone from Aries all the way to Pisces. We started in June, and it is amazing all that has occurred since June. Prior to starting that series, or this natural astrology series, just after, I should say, we started that, was the death of George Floyd, right, Stacie? Black Lives Matter wasn't even on the radar
At all.
We had no idea what we were going to be experiencing this past summer, and the election was up in the air. It's still a total wild ride, and we are experiencing Pisces in spades. Neptune is in Pisces currently. It just recently moved direct, and it's squaring the nodal axis. So this becomes a story about the truth versus fiction, being able to see things clearly. And that is really important when we're dealing with Neptune. Things can become very foggy. We're also in the middle of two eclipses. The first one was in Gemini on the 30th of November, which squares Pisces. And the new moon eclipse, the total solar eclipse on December 14th, will be in Sagittarius, which is another square to the Pisces archetype. And so we're all in this very metamorphic window as we prepare to enter 2021. I don't know why, but today was the first time when I saw this glyph, I really was looking at it closely. Maybe it just was so big in my sight that it captured me. When we talk about the water elements, or all the elements, there's 3 per sign. And here we have matter, that square at the bottom, and these 3 arrows, which is like Cancer, Scorpio, Pisces, heart, soul, spirit, pointing to the sky. That is so Piscean. And it's pointing to that timeless, seamless, boundless energy that we can experience simply from staring into the sky and looking at the stars. It is a very Neptunian experience. And so within these glyphs, we can see what the teachings are, how to experience heaven on earth, I would say. That's what this means to me. How to experience God as our well-being in a human container. All right, we've used this slide before, of course, when we looked at Cancer and Scorpio, the 3 water signs. And as we teach in evolutionary astrology, we can only evolve through the waterways, through those emotional bodies. We can't bypass them in order to experience the progression and evolution that our soul seeks. And as all of you know, and know for yourself, that it is those emotional experiences that propel you more deeply into your soul, and as a result, closer to that eternal pulse, closer to God, closer to spirit, or what you call God, how you experience God. It does require your ability to be vulnerable, your ability to slip out of all that resistance that is keeping you from your center and keeping you from the truth and keeping you from the ultimate destination of where it is that you want to go. And for all of us, it's like the wave returning back to the sea, back to the place where we began, back home to ourself, back home to the place where we started. And so we are all expressions of creation, like the waves separating from the sea. We are souls being born, and ultimately we have this experience of wanting to separate from that which created us through our desires that we wish to express as souls here, but then we have an equal and opposite desire to return back home and to merge back to the sea, into the source of all things, so we can be whole and holy. This is a common chart that's used in evolutionary astrology when we're looking at the essential needs of any soul. Not only your essential needs that are reflected in the second house, Taurus, and the inner side of Venus, but your needs and relationships to others, seen in the seventh house, Libra, and the outer side of Venus. There's a natural stress and inconjunct that occurs between the second and the seventh house. As well, there's an inconjunct from the seventh house to the 12th house. The higher octave of Venus is Neptune. And Neptune rules Pisces in the 12th house. And yet we see an inconjunct here, which has to do with the projections that so many of us have onto partners or others when we have expectations or needs that we want to have met by those partners or others in our life. And so then disillusionment can follow that. A natural experience when we attach too tightly to something. It's one of the most difficult experiences that we have. And even my 20-year-old daughter told me yesterday, Mom, did you know that attachment is the thief of joy? I said, wow, it is. Attachment and expectations can just rob you of your joy. So I want to go back, if we can, to that last slide. In discussing Pisces and the 12th house. Thank you. So lastly, what I really just want to share about this slide is that while we are all in a state of becoming, you know, there's also a natural need for all of us to establish an inner relationship to the source. If you notice, there's a natural sextile between the second house and the 12th house, which makes it very easy actually to connect with the source. The inner door is always open. We just have to turn in and walk through it. Neptune connects with what holds ultimate meaning. Venus, the lower octave of Neptune, connects to what holds earthly meaning. Anything that feels good on earth is Venus. But we are all searching for that experience of unconditional love, connection to that source which created us, and feeling whole into ourselves through that connection. And that is the only way to experience ultimate meaning. Ultimate meaning cannot be found outside of us here on earth, only within. And that is the teaching of, one of the teachings of this water trinity and the evolution of your soul, Cancer, Scorpio, Pisces. Okay, so our last planet to take a look at on this chakra slide, as we journeyed all the way through from Aries to Pisces here, we've got Neptune ruling the second chakra with Jupiter. And if you think about it, when a child is being born, they're coming through this cosmic chute from heaven into the womb, into that second chakra. And so, of course, we would have this miraculous symbol seen with Neptune sitting there ruling, co-ruling the second chakra. So we wanted to do something a little different today, given that it's a holiday season, and Stacy and I both had a few stories, but we decided on one in particular because our intention with this series is to teach how these archetypes are expressed naturally, but also to teach the natural teachings of evolutionary astrology as best that we can, and to offer our own experience. Because everybody that's been on these panels has either been taught directly by the founder, Jeffrey Wolfe Green, at one of the schools, or part of the correspondence course. And so we'd love to just be able to honor the work as it was intended to be taught in as best that we can. And the stories are always just a wonderful example of what each one of us goes through in our evolution as a result of interfacing with these teachings. And Stacie was fortunate enough to attend a couple of the schools, the very last schools that Jeffrey Wolfe Green taught. And so we decided that it would just be a perfect way to share really how powerful this work can be in facilitating your evolution. So Stace, it's all yours.
Okay. Yes, so it was in the 2003 Pluto school, the second leg of it. And I had volunteered my chart for group analysis, where the whole school takes the stab at understanding your placements and what how the transits are affecting. And some of my key questions were, am I going to be an astrologer? And then also, what do I do about my marriage? My marriage was missing something. And, there were just some troubles there. And so the school, all of the attendees, they offered insights, and I noticed that Jeffrey was becoming sort of progressively distressed. And I remember him saying, these symbols are pregnant. Look at them. What do you see? And as it turns out, with that Pisces in the fourth house that he has, or the Pisces moon in the fourth house, he just osmosed it. And obviously, as the founder of this work, knowing the symbols as deeply as he does, he saw what was coming for me. And so he spent some time with me to speak about the importance of committing to another who is in alignment with your evolutionary statement, which in my case was not true. I was attempting to live the corporate life. Well, the corporate wife life, who never wanted to go to the parties because it wasn't in my soul. I just wanted to fit some idea of what a perfect corporate wife would be without having to lose myself in corporate values. I couldn't do it. And he spent some time with me in that group session, and to help me understand that, it's not serving either one of you, because your growth directions are in completely different, they're going different ways. And so you have to think about what's best for each other. And he really did prepare me for what was to come, which is that when I returned to my hotel room that night after volunteering my chart, my then husband had called and said, I want a divorce. Right there. And he was serious. And because of the preparation that Wolfe sort of instilled in me just hours before, I was able not to panic. Because I saw the big picture. I saw that it was right. But, one of the Pisces lessons is that you will often find yourself standing on an abyss where there is a pull to go forward into the unknown, because that is representing returning desires. But there's also a simultaneous pull to stay oriented to the past, what's known and what's familiar. But I knew that what I had been doing, the structure of my life at that time wasn't appropriate for my spiritualization needs. And so he informed me he wanted the divorce. I said, okay, I agreed. It was a short phone call. And then all the emotions came out. I mean, I've never been so fearful in my life, because I was an astrology student. I wasn't working. suddenly I'd have to fend for myself, and just all of these unknowns. And I'm telling you that the urge was so strong to call back and say, please, let's work it out. But I didn't. And that night, there was this massive rainstorm, thunder, and just, I mean, the rain was so intense. And the funny thing is that it happened when I was laying in my bed feeling like I'm literally going to die from my emotions right now. I can't survive them. And then this thunder, just, it sounded like it was right there, and rain. And I just felt like, nature is acknowledging me. And it seems funny that, you know, massive lightning and rain would comfort you, but that's what it did. And once we made that decision, we never went back, ever. No one tried to correct it. We committed to the paths. When we separated, when he moved out, I had a rose quartz wand, and we broke it in half so that I would have one end, he would have the other, to symbolize, you know, eternal friendship, regardless of how this thing came out. And I'm going to try and speed up here. And, you know, I also, given that I wasn't employed, I had to find a whole new career. And so I started volunteering at an aviary. It's a zoo for birds. And after 6 months, they hired me as a keeper. And that was like the most fantastic job I've ever had in my life. And so it just goes to show that if you follow the evolutionary impulse, God's hand will be there if you trust, and if you're willing to accept it and receive it, and not try to focus so much on the past, the separating desires, but to try and focus on the abyss in front of you, where it's dark. You don't know there's nothing quantifiable. It's a big question, but it certainly transformed my life, like, permanently. It really gave me the freedom to see that, you know, I was stuck in this Piscean pattern of trying to rely on one aspect of my character, you know, which was glamour, like, let's look like the corporate wife. I was caught up in it. And so, but it allowed me to release that. And so I just have to say, like, Wolfe, his capacity to osmose another's inner reality is just nothing I've ever seen. And it changed my life, and it changed it for the better. So that's my little story. Oh, and these pictures, these are from the Pluto school. This was the first leg. There's a couple people there who aren't with us anymore, and many who still are. And then there's the other one. That was the second leg. That was when I had my epitome, or whatever, or epiphany.
Yeah. The epitome of the epiphany.
Yeah. Oh, and that's just kind of showing you kind of where I was before, where it's just like, I'm marrying my dream guy. I'm gonna have babies. And none of that came to pass. And it's all because I wasn't meant to be on that path. You know, this life for me has been about truly personal concentration, and that's hard to come by when you have children. So you know, it's all for the better. It was all for my evolution, and I'm very grateful for it.
So we're talking about the natural expression of Pisces, and whenever the natural expression of anything is suppressed, there's obviously going to be other things that manifest. And in your case, it was hiding, right? That's Pisces, hiding behind who she actually is, which is a daemon soul, someone very connected, not to the superficial, but to the natural. And so that's what you were returning to in this life. And obviously that Pisces moon that Jeffrey has really reached your Pisces moon and allowed you to have that emotional strength that you needed to grasp the bigger picture. There's an echo there. Is everything coming across okay? Okay, so we can move to the next slide. Thank you for sharing that, Stacy.
Of course.
All right, at the beginning of our journey, we again did not know what at all we had in store for us when it was, I think, early June of 2020. And since June of 2020, there have been protests, Black Lives Matter, and pandemics, and politics, and planetary extremes. Obviously, the politics, the pandemics, and the planetary extremes are already occurring, but they expanded and accelerated. And we have had an incredible amount of things to talk about. And we've all been experiencing as a collective, which is Pisces, a whole heck of so much to take in and take on, more than any of us have ever experienced in our entire lifetime. And Pisces, Neptune in the 12th house connects to our immune system and our ability to fight things off. And so, you know, obviously we are having to learn how to protect ourselves from the environment in a way that we haven't, again, since we've been alive in this lifetime. Do you have any thoughts on these, Stacy, before we move forward?
I don't think we could have seen any of this coming. I mean, other than the politics where I think everyone knew right off the bat that the current president wasn't going to leave early, and he basically announced his game plan. So in a way that's kind of expected, but at the same time it's not, because who does that? You know, it's unprecedented. And so it causes a lot of us to just really question what like this system that we've created, which is like our ultimate power, you know, and really the challenge for us now is to try and remember that there's a larger power in charge, and it's all unknown territory where we are on the precipice, and I think that we are being pulled to make a dive.
So another expression of Pisces and Neptune in the 12th house is healing and culmination and closure. And I hope and pray that with this transition, obviously one president's not going to be able to fix everything, but what we really need to focus on, a strong priority, is our climate. And so we'll hope and pray for that to be so as we move forward and into 2021. All right, we're going to move into the section now where we get to listen to our wonderful panel of experts. And our first guest today, Marty Dixon, she first met Jeffrey Wolfe Green, I want to say sometime in the 90s. Is that right, Marty? Okay, turn on your microphone. And so she met him long before any of us did. I think Rose, actually, she's not on today, but she knew him maybe before you even. But you were probably at one of the first schools, were you?
I think it was at the second school.
Oh, the second school, okay. But still, like in the 90s at some point. What year was that?
94.
Wow. Oh, it was the second school, because the first school was
Arizona.
Arizona, right? And the first school, by the way, for those of you who are listening, the very first school is a school that is sold on the correspondence course and all the DVDs that are available. So if you want to get a hold of those, it's the original course taught by Jeff Green in Arizona. And then you were at the next school. Where was that, Marty?
Sacramento.
Oh, Sacramento. Awesome. Well, Marty always has wonderful stories. And what I learned about you last time, Marty, because you're just pulling out these pearls. And I was like, wow, that you took some pretty serious notes at those schools. Yeah. I mean, I could just feel it that you were writing down every little word, and I just loved it. So I hopefully you have some more of that today. But go ahead and let everybody know what planets you have, and I'll pass the torch to you.
Well, thank you, Kristin. I love you guys too, and I totally identify with all the deep pearls that you give, your insights and your revelations. We are family.
Mm-hmm.
And how's the audio? Audio okay? Okay, thanks. Yeah, we definitely are family, and I very so much identify with everything that you just said. The planets that I have are going to be Pluto and Mercury. So I'm sure that Linda will tell me how I'm doing time-wise, because I have no idea how to do that. But anyway, thank you, Kristin and Stacy and Linda. You're awesome, and we so much appreciate you. We're going to talk beginning with Neptune. As all of you know, Neptune is pure consciousness. It takes on the form and the attributes and the characteristics of the container which it occupies. In this case, it's a human body. And Neptune is the totality of all consciousness. It's a hard one. It's the hardest one to grasp, but I'll try. And Neptune also relates to the instinct within all consciousness to transcend, to embrace transcendental reality or mystical and timeless reality, to understand its linkage to that which created it in the first place. This consciousness is linked with the pineal gland, which is in the center of the brain, which secretes a hormone called melatonin, or the sleep hormone. It is through this hormone that we are allowed a natural way for consciousness to spiritualize. So normally, because melatonin regulates sleeping and dreaming, and also can be heightened during a meditative state. This is how we normally spiritualize and go through periods of wakeful mindedness to perhaps the subconscious taking over, and that's how the spiritualization process normally proceeds in a human. And hopefully that's how all of us sort of start to wake up over time.
Mm.
The point is, we who live in the collective consciousness, which shares all consciousness with all things and all beings, that's a hard one to grasp, can get overwhelmed, especially to those very Piscean types who have very little filter to all that is. So that we must periodically tune out, withdraw, and rhythmically enter the world of pure spirit, what Jeffrey refers to as dreaming, in order for our individual consciousness to selectively renew. We are not our ego. We are not our job description. I love explaining that to people because a lot of people think that they are. We are in a natural state. In our natural state or our dream state, we are not in ego. Dreams can't lie. And when we dream, we are free to pay attention to that which is of essence to our very soul. And our dreams will mirror to us a level of consciousness and spirituality that we have obtained on a soul level, and that we can only dream of in our waking state. Pisces contains archetype of all the signs. It is the most mutable of all the signs. It shares movement, release, and resiliency with the mutable cross, so to speak, with the other signs of Gemini, Virgo, and Sagittarius. And because Pisces contains a 12th house, Neptune contains the archetype of all the signs, by the time Pluto gets there, it's normally a huge release of not only those archetypes, but all of the archetypes of the zodiac that we have wandered through up to that point. And it can create a very balsamic life, meaning relationships come and go, people come into from the past, karmic relationships, karmic situations. Things can happen pretty quickly, endings and beginnings, 12th house. So that's Neptune can really keep a person on their toes and really hopping, and in some cases struggling with their sanity, because we need to renew the mind, remember, through dreaming. And if we don't get that time out or that permission from ourselves to do so, we can really, it can turn into a nervous breakdown. The way I look at it, Pluto in a chart or transiting Pluto denotes a purging of that house. And in the 12th house, the greatest extremes, the greatest highs and lows that Pluto has to offer are offering a process of transformation that has been before unable to achieve. And the evolutionary intent prior to this lifetime, with Pluto in the 9th house, of course, is to evolve consciousness to merge closer to Creator. Pluto in the 12th house or transiting the 12th house is purging our identification or the role we think we need to play in our lives or the world. This signature can create extreme disillusionment with one's current life and social status. It is punctuated by a loss of meaning and value with the external world, as Kristin said, and its belief systems, and the role that our egoic identity plays in the world, or how we think we are expected to behave. And of course, I need to just emphasize that the 9th house Pluto can produce extreme disillusionment, dissatisfaction, alienation, and confusion within one's own life, current life. These periods of self-doubt and disillusionment with the role we think we've been playing come in cycles and can come like birthing contractions into a new self-identity that is larger and more fused with the divine, the Creator, or all that is. Disillusionment is necessary with one's purpose of living currently, and this individual with 9th house Pluto can be seem to withdraw from normal activities and society and eventually lead to a kind of metamorphosis in which new thoughts, realizations, and dimensions of self can be born and now be realized. This metamorphosis emerges from the soul, and it is inspired by divine sources, so that a new sense of life purpose and relatedness to a much larger living cosmos can emerge. This is the beginning process of the center of consciousness in an individual migrating from the ego to the soul. It also involves transitory periods of consciousness migrating between the left brain, Gemini, ruled by Gemini, and the right brain, ruled by Sagittarius, as the individual learns to ever question and release old limiting thought patterns and free up the brain for a more cosmic worldview. Jeffrey wrote in Pluto Volume 1 that by experiencing revelations and realizations that seem to arrive spontaneously in their consciousness, these individuals will be experiencing in their own ways divine communion or guidance or intervention. And so periods of self-doubt with Pluto in the 9th house are necessary to find life's true purpose and meaning for the individual. It is a birthing process bigger than any of us, and it allows for a more expansive sense of self and self-identification and a more greater understanding of why we began incarnating on this earth in the first place. It is the realization of the wave returning to the sea, thank you, Kristin, and the miraculous beginning of the exhaustion of all separating desires from source until there ultimately is only one desire remaining, and that is to return to our original relationship with Creator from whence we came. And I'll speed it up here. We can also look at Pluto in the 12th house as approaching or transiting the ascendant, creating a whole new unique identity for the individual. That's one thing that is happening with this Pluto in the 9th house birthing process. Let's see. We are learning a strong culminating soul lesson with Pluto in the 9th, and we are learning about the soul's impulse to decondition from preconceived patriarchal belief systems and to simply embrace one's own spirituality. Jeffrey really stressed that the Piscean person and the Piscean nature, and certainly Pluto in the 12th house, is learning to just be. That took me a long time, but he gave many examples of just being. I'm just here. Life is good. That's a hard one to really get for a lot of people, but Linda's pictures are absolutely perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Per, Pluto in the 12th house can bring the oldest wounds, the oldest karmic associations and situations to a finality where they must be studied and dealt with, or else they just get harder to deal with. Many people, associations, situations from the past, karmic life situations come to a head. As I said, it can become a very balsamic and very busy lifetime. You're trying to transmute and transcend an awful lot. The individual may subconsciously recreate dynamics that they have known before in order to propel the evolutionary process, Pluto. They may experience alternating periods of great spiritual insight, light and guidance from dreams, epiphany and revelation, Stacy, based on their evolutionary state, with alternating periods of doubt, disillusionment, confusion. This is necessary to wake up and prod the psyche and hopefully to help internalize the realizations of the evolutionary intent of the individual soul. The individual can also subconsciously recreate conditions of the past in order to have the opportunity to forgive. I think that came up recently. To forgive and or heal another, and therefore forgive and heal themselves. That's a huge one I would love to spend 3 days on. Which creates new roads of association and relationship to the Godhead. In this way, through forgiveness, people and situations may feel incredibly familiar, deja vu for example, or again, like I said, a balsamic or culminating life. The individual may experience glimpses of merging with the infinite and all of nature, and know how to describe them or contain them. They have no foundation. They've never been here before. They're wandering into the abyss. But they can't hold on to the past because that's becoming stagnant and it becomes too painful at some point. So they're looking for a culmination of some sort and the tendency toward intense introspection. Remember that Pisces is a polarity of Virgo. And with the energy and focus of being drawn inward, they're able to therefore come to a point where they just let go, fall into the abyss, are caught by the cosmos, and release that which they no longer need. These individuals are typically repeating patterns that they have known before with the evolutionary intent to culminate the soul's current desire to merge closer with Source. We already talked about melatonin. Typically, the Neptunian type individual is recipient of information or identities or images from the subconscious that pertain to other lifetimes and can set in motion, for example, in the extreme, what could be called schizophrenia because of the overwhelming bombardment of the unconscious to the unconscious mind and the whole fear of losing control. But the whole purpose of Neptune, I'm dyslexic, bear with me, not Neptune in the 9th, Pluto in the 12th. The whole purpose of Pluto in the 12th, I'm going to do that, is to let yourself fall into the abyss. You will be caught with loving arms. Let's see. Neptune is attempting to intensify the sense of current life meaninglessness or pointlessness or loss of value or external meaning, so that you will seek the meaning of the cosmos and what all of nature has to offer to you. So you're seeking higher meaning with Pluto in the 12th house. You're seeking something non-material, something that is involved with timelessness or ultimacy, as Jeffrey called it. And as the center of consciousness gravitates from ego to soul, like I said, the individual will experience a tug-of-war between left and right brain, back and forth, until they find balance between the two. And I'll get into Mercury in just one moment. For people who tend to be very left brain, Mercury, Gemini, and very active in their deductive thought, this transitory back and forth movement between left brain and right brain can cause the most profound periods of depression and periods of hyper-awareness, alternating with confusion because of the extreme polarity between the logical left brain and the intuitive right brain. Increased melatonin, which creates light in the brain, can help with this. Dreaming, meditation, prayer, so to speak, being in nature can really help with this transition from left brain to right brain consciousness. The evolutionary intent is to create enough disillusionment, thank you, Linda, with logical, everyday deductive thinking, and to want to compel disillusionment that it will compel the individual to create a personal relationship and path to Creator. The Piscean signature in a natal chart is the soul's impulse to naturally spiritualize. And with Pluto in the 12th, by aspect or transit, one can experience very high highs and lows. There can be a fear of chaos or mental illness or losing control of one's life, definition, or meaning. And compensatory behavior can result, where one will try to fit in if they think that they're being too erratic or behaving too abnormal. Manic behavior can manifest, or transitory religious fanaticism or fundamentalism can be a manifestation if they are clinging too hard to ego and past belief systems. So let's look a little bit at Mercury in this chart, and as you can see, Mercury is in the 6th house in Pisces, and it is preceded by the Sun in Pisces, and it is also followed by a stellium in Pisces in the 6th house. Quite a Piscean signature. This is a profound artist who is very talented in many ways of life, and he gets his ideas from the ethers. They just fall upon him. And this is a 12th house Pluto, and you can see that Pluto is preceded by Uranus, and they're both retrograde, and they're both at the on the ascendant, at the very end of the 12th house. He has Cancer moon, and let's just say that he's coming this lifetime dealing with a lot of karmic situations where it's necessary to just fall into the abyss and allow for the disassociation, the confusion, the timeout, the free association, etc. And he is a musician, so he really has learned to let that wash over him so that he can relax and create his music. And the way that Jeffrey explained that we learn from allowing ourselves to just let go and let the left brain go and spin freely and let the right brain take over. He said that this is a process of learning to trust in a greater consciousness and a higher power. And he says that as we do this, we osmose more information that we need, but we have to let go of that shore or that cliff first in order to fall into the healing waters and gain that inspiration. So it's a very hard step to take. But depending on the evolutionary state of the individual, learning to still one's mind, Gemini, is very important. And in this chart, you can see that someone is definitely able to do that. Unfortunately, they took to taking too many drugs, and their life was cut short early. This is the chart of Kurt Cobain. But his dissociative or antisocial behavior or daydreaming or timeout, so to speak, was the crux of his beautiful art and a brilliant manifestation of a very Piscean mind, and a good example of Pluto in the 9th house, or Pluto in the 12th house, excuse me. And because I've done work as a medium, I know he's in a very good place. I had one teacher, a Native American teacher, tell us that the worst thing in life that can ever happen to you is to die a dishonorable life. He lived a good life, and he was on a very good road. He was happy before the exit, and he was excited to continue by all very close accounts. And he's in a very good place, and he's very well loved. And let me just stay on this chart for one moment, Linda. I'll just go back to that just for one moment. So let's see here. I want to just look at the sign on the 12th house cusp, because as you all know, the sign on the 12th house cusp, in this case, which would be Leo, speaks to us of our ultimate ideals, value, meaning, relationship to Creator, and purpose for living. And that is ruled by his sun in the 6th house. So the way I look at it, what Jeffrey has given us such a gift to be able to see these things and interpret them, by the archetypes. He says, I know that he would say that with the ruler of the 12th house cusp in the 6th house, that Kurt was really meant to do his work and to weave his songs and spin his stories to the betterment and the teaching of all others, and help us to open up a little bit and access that universal source energy. And he certainly did that. He had a famous quote. One thing I want to add is that he was very vulnerable, but through his vulnerability, he was able to receive increased light. Even though his earthly experience was very painful to him, he exuded light and gave it to others. He didn't want anything. He didn't want notoriety. He didn't want fame. He didn't want riches. He didn't want any of that. He just wanted to be left alone and do his work. He did not want to perform or go on stage. He just wanted to make music. And so one person that I know of that I worked with who knew him said that when they were in a car together, unfortunately he was doing some drugs, but she said he was luminescent. He had a literal halo. He had light around him. He emitted light. And one of his favorite quotes in a song was, "The sun is gone, but I have a light." So Kurt was on a good road. And just I'll just add one more thing, and that this chart's fine. I'll just add one more thing, that in the message that Kurt left to the world, he said, "I don't have passion anymore for what I'm doing. And so remember, it's better to burn out than to fade away. Peace, love, and empathy. I'm only here because I love and feel sorry for people too much, I guess. Empathy. We all need more empathy." And so he was pleading with the universe to have empathy, and he was leaving that as a message to the world. He said that he didn't believe in too much anymore, and he was obviously had bouts of depression, extreme depression. But he says, I do, God, believe me, I do believe in something, but it's just not enough. So he had that feeling of, I'm here now, I'm seeking, I don't know where I'm going, not knowing what next step to take, not knowing, who to call on or what to do. He just knew he was in a state of not enough. And that's a Piscean state where we reach out and seek a true path to Creator. And then this chart is showing Pluto toward Neptune tendencies. And as you can see, Pluto is in the 9th house. And there was a wonderful natural astrology presentation given by Kristin and Deva and Stacy and a few others on, probably Ari, I believe, on Sagittarius, and I really highly recommend you watching that. It has tremendous charts and tremendous descriptions in there. But here's a 9th house Pluto conjunct Mercury, and it is sextile Neptune in the 12th house. So there's a lot going on here, and you can also see that the ruler of the 12th house in Libra is Venus in the 10th house, conjunct the South Node in Virgo. So this is a little bit different. This is someone who exhibited a lot of aberrant behavior, heard a lot of voices, was considered perhaps off or different by some, and had to definitely compensate for that behavior. And the North Node is the moon, is conjunct the moon in Pisces. This person either subconsciously or consciously, probably not consciously, but subconsciously, is learning to dissolve the ego, moon in Pisces, North Node, and really let Creator take over and really give in to those dreams and visions and premonitions that they might be receiving. The soul's desire in this chart is to individuate this lifetime and to deal with repressed emotional pain and trauma. And okay. And then they have a Pisces moon conjunct the 4th house in the North Node opposite Venus. He's been working on dissolving the ego and uniting with source for some time. And he's coming into the light of that evolutionary intent this lifetime. That is a chart of Robin Williams. And I just want to say that Jeffrey taught us that due to the soul's evolutionary intent and evolution with very strong left brain, right brain signature, it may be harder for them to try to deal with the transition from left brain to right brain thoughts along the road of dissolving the ego and uniting with Creator. In this case, I think this was the case with Robin. And he did exhibit compensatory behavior, showing that he was trying to fit into society. But in the end, unfortunately, there was still more work to do. I'm sure he's found his way and found a path to creator, but he wasn't really able to integrate that, I don't think, really well into the external world that he lived in. And his life was quite painful as well. Two films I'd recommend to watch regarding this chart and this lecture would be one called Awakenings and another one called What Dreams May Come, which is pretty autobiographical in my opinion. So to summarize, Pluto correlates with the evolutionary principle of life in all of its forms. And because the 12th house contains the whole of the archetypes of the other signs, Jeffrey taught us that the evolution of not only the individual, but it also allows for evolution of the planet. So in other words, what allows for evolution of the one spontaneously encourages the evolution of the other. And which allows for planetary evolutionary issues to be accomplished. If you allow for even a small percentage of people at all times in their own way to question and open up the brain, Gemini, that's the one part of the equation, keep it open, you will allow for evolution not only for yourself, but for all those around you, and in a quantum sense, Pisces, if you're very Piscean, of course, those of the planet. Of course, all of these principles occur naturally and through transit, and all of us are going to experience these kinds of archetypes in our own way. But at some point, if you will just meditate and draw upon the archetypical intent in a chart and cooperate, Jeffrey said, you will find growth. I last heard Jeffrey speak public in 2005, and like so many of us, we were thinking, because he was such a great Neptunian teacher, we were all thinking, oh no, don't quit lecturing and don't turn off the tap. Don't turn off that tap. We're hanging on this, every word. But he has given us a template. How we can prepare for the inevitable transition to the light body or end of life transition is to make good choices now, to live deliberately as if life mattered. Take the time to give thanks, forgive, tune in, and just listen. That's how Mercury, we program Mercury. It's very teachable. Mercury is very programmable. To try to open the mind a little bit every day, be careful with your words. One day we will all go through the transition from light to light. It's good to recognize this now and begin to prepare for that time, that eventuality. And lastly, I'll just end with a quote from Jeffrey. One day, you will begin to realize that there is absolutely nothing on this good earth and beyond to transcend, and only all of creation to unite with. Or as Jeffrey put it, even God evolves.
Mm.
Thank you, Marty. That was great. A few thoughts I want to share about the chart examples of Kurt Cobain and
Robin Williams.
Robin Williams, thank you. One of the lessons in Pisces is that we are learning to dissolve whatever boundaries are in the way of us merging with the source. And as these things evolve, there is an unknown time frame on that process. And it usually includes progressive disillusionments about what you thought was real and what you thought had value. And those things, as they dissolve, as the disillusionment starts to bring focus back to reality, there is not always something that immediately replaces it. So it's a void, and it's an excruciating void. I can say this firsthand because part of my soul's history, I have multiple suicides in my history. And one of the things that we need to understand is that when that path is chosen, there will be a need to come back and learn those lessons twofold. Obviously, there are always mitigating factors. And I agree with what you said, Marty, that Kurt Cobain was really, really immersing himself in the process, and that will work to his advantage. But I just wanted to share those few thoughts on that.
Yeah, the ninth house Pluto, or 12th, here we go. 12th house Pluto is really hard. As you can see with these chart examples, they're extreme examples, but there is reception on the other side. And if you've lived your life in a very whole way and tried to forgive, as both of these did, I mean, both of their quotes are extremely profound if you study their lives. What the ninth house Pluto, 12th house Pluto can do is bring us to the threshing room floor, where we're just left there on the floor saying, God, pick me up and use me, whatever's left of me, show me the way, I'm all yours. We are wide open to that influence.
Yeah.
Hey, Marty, will you read me the quote from Robin Williams again?
If I can find it. The quote, well, I don't have a quote from Robin. I have a quote from Kurt.
Okay, I got that one already. I just wanted to make sure I didn't miss one from Robin. But
Not from
what
Robin.
I remember hearing was that he knew he was getting dementia or Alzheimer's.
Well, a
and
form of that.
a form of that.
Yeah.
And so he knew he was going to be gone anyway. And so what I remember Jeffrey saying, you know, it's true that we can't play God, that we can't take our life prematurely. But there are litigating, or there's some exceptions, I would say. And of
Yes.
course, the exceptions would be if somebody's literally on life support. And maybe in Robin Williams' case, there would have been some exceptions. But of course, you know, if somebody does take their life prematurely with this intense need to escape whatever reality that they're living, whether it's, you know, a soul being trapped. Obviously, in Robin Williams' case, he was so creative. His creative process was everything. It's really what made him who he was, a sense of humor. Would he still have his sense of humor if he lost his mind? I mean, and the scariest thing for anybody to feel as if they were losing all of that. But it is true, as Stacy said, that the soul will be thrown back into the body within, Jeffrey taught 7 days in most cases, and having to re-experience those lessons twofold, tenfold, whatever it might be. And so I just want to share too, if you're listening and you're a working astrologer, and because I've had teenagers in my office who've attempted suicide, who still thought about suicide, who'd been in treatment for suicide. And this teaching that Stacy just shared was the thing that walked them off the cliff every time, which was, you know, by taking your life prematurely does not allow you to escape everything that you're feeling right now, that it will be even harder. If you do that, you'll be coming back. And in every case that I've had with these clients, they have frozen and said, you know what? I know that's true. I know I've been here before, and it's the reason I'm sitting here right now. I just need somebody to walk me off that cliff. And then it opens a door and it allows you an opportunity to talk more about this other side of Pisces. And frankly, I mean, we're talking about natural astrology, and just because it's natural doesn't mean it's easy. So these are natural things that happen to people as a result of, you know, their choices, their evolution, or whatever else it might be. So anyway, I'm glad you brought that up, Stacy. Absolutely, so important for helping people with this piece of their journey. It's so easy to just want to wave the white flag and say, I give up. But we can't give up.
No.
No. And before we move to our next guest, and Marty, I just loved everything. I feel you so immersed in this work, and you've always been this way. You're absolutely just walking the talk and doing your best. Do you have a 12th house Pluto? Because you said you're learning to just be.
No, I have 10th house Pluto.
But where's your Pisces?
Neptune on the ascendant.
There you go. That's huge. So I think one of the biggest Pisces lessons is learning to just be in the moment and to feel and not think, right? To just feel, and to feel even what your highest self, and through extension, the guides, the gods, you know, the higher ups are trying to show you.
That's
you
right,
know?
Kristin. And Jeffrey said to learn to just, no matter what, he stressed, no matter what you're going through, learn to just take a moment and breathe. And between the breath, the stillness between the breath, you're entering into spirit, the realm of spirit. And he said, just be happy and content with wherever you are. He said that's a key to happiness on this earthly plane.
And yes, indeed. And lastly, you said even God evolves. And
Yeah.
for those of you who
Take me a long time to get that one.
Well, yeah, for those of us who were growing up with religion, with these teaching that God is perfect, and of course that always like, we are all in a state of becoming. We are all expressions of God, and if God was, how, I guess the question Jeffrey used to ask us in school was, how can a perfect something make an imperfect something?
Right.
It's not possible.
Right.
So we could go down this road all day, but anyway, thank you so much for being here. And Stace, I'll let you introduce our next guest.
Yes, now we're going to have Deva Green, who's going to be talking on 3 planets today. Welcome, Deva.
Thanks for having me back. To also share some thoughts that came from when Marty was speaking and from the introduction. I am close friends with a 12th house Pluto soul, South Node in Pisces in the 4th, Neptune and Sag in the 2nd square the nodes. And that process of closure or culmination through releasing false beliefs and progressively merging with totality or the source, that you can see in that signature that there was a necessary closure or resolution from false religion, that he had situations where, due to religious fanaticism, it became an attitude of there's been too much fighting and I'm not even going to approach the subject. It just became an abyss, and which creates all these different issues around meaning and trying to fill the holes in these various ways. And in his nature, he was able to heal that, or create a real closure and a real healing of hiding from his true nature, coming back to his honest self. Seeing the Neptune being in Sag in the 2nd was like a recovery of his truth that was coming through the throwing off of what wasn't real. Very, very Neptune. And his prism became music. Music became a vehicle for him to tune into, from my vantage point, a real etheric or a real universal energy that helped him align with source on his own terms. And that was really the key. It couldn't be something external to himself. It really needed to come from the inside out. And that being something that dictated what's real, what's not, the Virgo polarity point, discerning actual reality from illusion and fantasy and so on. And he has North Node being in Virgo, also Pluto's polarity point. So it's like, by doing that, a healing and a closure of, I would say, a variety of spiritual wounds can happen as you start to embrace the source as source is. Not via those projections or illusions, but wow, whether it's through my guitar, whether it's through sitting in nature and communing, or whether it's through working with children, or whatever that vehicle is, it's like that Pisces energy just says, just be. Whatever that vehicle happens to be, that can be the way to tune in and to recapture that sense of organic spiritual growth, or from my vantage point, it's knowing source as source is. And when that happens, a closure or a healing that's such a necessary part of Pisces can happen. So just wanted to thank you for sharing what you did. It really blossomed, or it really nurtured some seeds in my consciousness, true Neptune style. So thanks for that. And my planets today are going to be Venus, also Jupiter, and Saturn. And one aspect of Pisces then is totality, that when we're looking at Neptune, it's every single sign that preceded it in one sign. Everything coming through it's like a closing where it's like everything coming through everything that's come before, which can make it very difficult energies to work with at times, because you have to take the time to resolve those unresolved threads, or it's the temptation is to push ahead. The temptation is to say, oh, you know, it can just be so overwhelming, and I just like wanted that white flag that you were talking about. But when we're able to make those necessary resolutions and allow that closure to happen, then relative to Jupiter being in Pisces, we can start to release those false teachings or release those false filters. And Jupiter correlates to our natural truth, our most natural way of being, or um, our intuition as well, how we interpret life. And so souls with Jupiter and Pisces can very much, on an intuitive sense, the strength can be sensing or feeling that inner connection, or feeling the being able to intuit what's universally true. And in the process of that, releasing or seeing reality for what it is. Again, the Virgo polarity point, or being able to connect universal truths through the intuition, and in that way dissolve or let go of either the personal truth that wasn't universal, or it's a way of expanding. It's a way of expanding beyond artificial truth or even personal truth into connecting to what's true for us all, or what will be true regardless of the passage of time. Um, and a great example of this, from my point of view, is Leonardo DiCaprio. He's got Jupiter being in Pisces in the 6th house, and it squares notes. And I believe the south node is in Sagittarius. Let's see here. Yeah, the south node, north node, sorry, the south node is in the 9th and in Gemini, and the north node then is in Sagittarius in the 3rd house. So we've got Jupiter squaring the nodes. And one of his ways of recovering this, or one of his ways of kind of healing these perhaps spiritual wounds that he may have carried in, seeing Jupiter in Pisces being in the 6th house, was becoming a documentarian, or voicing what was happening in nature, or what was happening in wildlife from a universal perspective, how we were all impacted by it, and also documenting different people's responses, like this is what's happening around the world. And it was a very different role than, don't get me wrong, I love his acting, he's one of my favorite actors. But one of his quotes about himself is, you know, what I do for a living is I play fictitious characters. That's what I do. And it's really hard at times to not get lost in playing those fictitious roles, and stepping into this documentarian role where what was going on around the world, what was happening in nature, wildlife, and so on, became a means for him to recover his own natural truth, discerning what's my actual, what is my actual truth, what's not, what's real, what's not. And the more he did that, from my point of view, the more you could see him deepening and maturing in his own roles in movies, whether it was through portraying these really kind of revolutionary revolutionary roles. So one of them was The Revenant, which is a great picture. And I mean, it's not, I guess it's not criticized, it's not romanticized, it's in ways brutally honest. In terms of how he protected himself in nature, how it became through with the Mars and Scorpio a way of healing from betrayal. um, that's part of the picturing, or part of the movies about that too, about literally being left for dead. And he recovers through that, or he looking at the Scorpio in the second house energy, why he would pick a role like that. But he became clearer in himself. It's like he was able to do that, to show up more as he is. So looking at this Jupiter being in Pisces in the sixth square, the nodes, it was like a way for him to feel safe and secure, kind of releasing those hiding patterns, or those parts that could be all too good, and almost playing any role, or being able to sell the deal to almost anybody. Looking at the ninth, he also has those kind of roles where it's a a very charismatic silver tongue devil, being able to make almost anything seem real when it's not. So from my vantage point, looking at this, the intuition, or it was like a way of him being able to connect to universal truths, or to purge those illusions, and to step into what truly has meaning, through totality. It wasn't always, it's the light and the dark. It's not glamorizing things, but being able to tune into the source as is, and as a way of showing up clear in himself, and being able to again release those parts of hiding, and truly the types of messages, or the documentaries will, from my point of view, will hold meaning no matter when you watch them. It's literally capturing the destruction of nature, and what people are doing to try and help, and also some people's checkout from it, the people who've kind of raised their white flags, and what we can do, or trying to inspire us to look to really see that, or to be very tuned in to our connection to nature, so that we don't check out, and that we, with Pluto being in the first, advocating a very active role. And being a teacher, being a messenger for that, seeing the North Node being in the third, in Sagittarius. With Saturn being in Pisces, then structure of consciousness. We're looking at how every given planet is going to be in the birth chart, is going to be structured relative to Saturn. Kristin, I remember something you shared about this. It can feel like swimming in your clothes.
Yeah.
It can literally feel like, because underneath that, or with Saturn and Pisces, it's very much a consciousness that's structured around totality, around universal, around trying to heal from perhaps being conditioned by what society would try to imprint as having meaning. And that structure, the Saturn and Pisces, is either going to want that to be dissolved, or brought to closure, or to escape. It's like a checkout in order to recapture, in order to restructure around timeless and universal laws. So it can be an experience of um, being kind of behind the scenes, or kind of watching what's going on around you, and feeling very like that there's something much more, or feeling intrinsically tuned into a deeper truth, or a deeper meaning than what's being presented, and perhaps also being able to see through the illusions of things, and healing from disillusionment relative to structure or society, and was portrayed again as holding meaning, because Saturn and Pisces can grasp that at the end of the day it's an empty cup. And very much structuring around, from my vantage point, let's say taking culture, Saturn being connected to cultures and tribes. How is universal law expressed in different customs, or in different society? Like, what's the universal meaning behind all this? Trying to dissolve, or trying to kind of wipe away those artificial structures, or there's artificial paradigms, but showing, for example, how each culture, either through time or in the present, is trying to express or is trying to structure around also what's timelessly true at the same time. So it's releasing those more artificial parts, or those more structured paradigms, and embracing more what's timeless. And a good example of that, or at least from my point of view, is a singer from Iceland, and her name is Björk. She has Saturn and Pisces in the third house, Pluto in the ninth, and South Node then being in Sag in the first. And from her music, it's all about ancestry and literally channeling or being receptive to what was true, what was conveyed in the past, and how that contained a universal truth that we can all connect to if we dissolve that um, uh, the separation through time, so to speak. It's a very Saturn and Pisces, but you can see in her lyrics, it's like trying to feel safe, structuring yourself and communicating that universal language that was suppressed or that received false judgment in the past. Um, One of her songs, Isabel, it's about essentially, she has some Taurus energy too, second house, about being able to become visible again or being able to communicate again, seeing the third house in Saturn through being alone, or essentially escaping from artificial society. And it was by doing that, by being able to escape from what was artificial, that she was able to recover her language and transmute, or in a sense, grasp onto the timeless energies that were being imparted to her from her ancestors in a way, or what remained to be true from her past. Again, the connection to universal law. So she's an example of somebody who was able to heal from the disillusionments of meaninglessness through structuring around timeless language, or through expressing in her own Piscean way messages that are universally applicable and were true in the past, present, now. And so she's definitely an example of a soul who's able to or who's able to structure around these more timeless energies rather than artificial or rigidly defined. And also for Venus and Pisces, then when we're looking at our inner relationship to ourself and what will be attracting to us via that inner relationship, these are very much souls who are desiring to align, or desiring to purge temporal values, or values that will ultimately lead to that feeling of holding an empty cup. Because it's that Pisces energy that can be so, it correlates to the imagination, and it's only limited by the imagination, so it can be very much a feeling of chasing dreams and so on. So when we're looking at Venus and Pisces in a natural expression, these can be souls that are able to convey either through their values, or how they make their living, or through their relationships. They can align with a higher cause, a higher purpose, as a way for meaning to be inwardly defined, big or small. Or so these can very much be souls who, on a heart level, or on an inner relationship level, value commitment to causes that affect humanity, whether it's the environment, or whether it's animals, or with Venus and Pisces, there can be the feeling of the actor playing characters or playing these roles. And so you can express it through that as well. But it's connected to the eternal, or it's connected to what will have meaning again, regardless of the passage of time. And the soul's in a process of closing or culminating a cycle relative to relationships. So often, when an experience of disillusionment occurs, where they either feel that they're holding the empty cup, or the meaning that once was held in their relationship is coming to a closure, it can draw the soul closer to source, or it can draw the source closer to what will have meaning outside that relationship. Because as Kristin and Stacie and also Marty were sharing, that ultimately meaning cannot be defined externally. That it's the source trying to draw us towards her or him, towards God, Goddess, in order to heal that, or in order to connect to what's timeless rather than what's temporal. And I believe Edgar Casey, who is an example of somebody who has Venus in Pisces and was able to embrace eternal, or was able to embrace dynamics that were way far and beyond his conditioning. He had the 10th house Pluto and orientated towards Christianity when he grew up, and yet through spontaneous channelings, it just awakened him. It opened up his inner relationship. It helped him become more receptive to what was timeless and so on, and became a means for him to relate ultimately to himself in terms of a timeless being, or being a receptor for what was eternal rather than that Saturn. It's the interfacement between Saturn and Pisces, the finite and the infinite. So when we're going through these transitions, or the experiences of feeling that the loss of meaning, or the feeling of kind of losing stability, it's, from my point of view, in a natural expression, that's when Pisces can facilitate an alignment with source, with what will help us cultivate a connection to the source in a long-lasting or meaningful way. So it's all a detox from what's been excess, and pulling us closer to what's real, or pulling us closer to the eternal. Those are my thoughts for today.
All right. Wow, look at that slide. I was waiting for the music, but the music is within us. That's all I gotta say. Just
I
like
think
the
we
light.
got Venus and Pisces too, Deva.
Yeah, Deva.
Oh, good.
You forgot Venus, I think.
No, he's been talking about Venus. She was just talking about Venus.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Weren't you?
Yes, I was. Edgar Casey.
Edgar Casey, yeah. Okay, so before we bring on Ari to talk about Neptune and Pisces, I just want to, just because we've covered 3 planets, I want to say a few things, if that's okay. And oh my gosh, I don't even know where to begin. Between you and Marty, I'm taking all these notes, I have to say. I need to go back to Marty and just say the quote, "It's better to burn out than fade away," you said, right? So I just wanted to thank you for sharing that quote of Cobain. Kurt Cobain said that. And because burning out means you've taken something all the way. You know, you've taken it, you've experienced every nuance you possibly can, and there's nothing more there. And that's what happens when the soul is done being here. We've run out of it. We've exhausted all of our desires. So that was the quote that was sitting with me, and I just couldn't find it in the moment when you were talking. So it feels very much too like this Pisces experience of is this all there is? And I know that when I was searching for my calling and my bliss, and so disenchanted with my life in corporate America, And I thought to myself that same question at my Saturn return. I have Saturn in Pisces. And I said, is this all there is? I mean, because this is not enough. Let me tell you, I am suffering here. And so anyway, thank you, Marty, for sharing that. Fading away is giving up. And we can't give up, but we come back here and we have to figure it out. And the other thing too, I just wanted to mention when you talked about like the most painful thing for any soul is when they've left this world in some inhonorable way, or
the worst thing that can happen to a person is to die a dishonorable death.
To die a dishonorable death, right? And so to me, you know, a dishonorable death is also giving up, right? Or,
yes.
You know, just, yeah. So I just wanted to go back to that just to complete those thoughts and my feelings about all that. But Deva, with Venus and Pisces too, you said you were talking about the same thing about, you know, all these things that don't hold meaning here on earth. That so you were forced to really explore more spiritual or, yeah, so much more divine ideas about what happens beyond this realm of existence. And that was just so important. It's so important with evolutionary astrology as well to be able to experience all that you cannot see, right, physically, and to go beyond that. So I know I'm like stealing the floor here so much, Stacy. I want to give you an opportunity to check in with Deva before we bring Ari on.
Oh no, that was all good.
Okay.
But I do, there's one thing, Deva, when you were speaking about Saturn in Pisces, it came up to me how important the factor of judgment is. Because in Capricorn, you're sort of making judgments on norms and all this stuff. In Pisces, it's you're making judgments on ultimate standards of conduct, things that you know are possible, which Jeffrey called perfection, although there is no perfection, because after all, if Goddess itself is evolving, you know, a perfect being doesn't need to evolve. And so there is no such thing as perfection, but there is this pull that's inherent to our nature to really think about these ultimate standards of conduct. It's things that we just know in our consciousness that are right and wrong, and to really judge the intent. It's important to make judgments of intent because we need to learn discrimination and things like that. But I think where Saturn could go awry is in feeling it's your mission to punish someone. So I don't know. Do you have anything to add to that, David? To those thoughts, or Kristin?
Well, I mean, I have Saturn in Pisces, so I'm well aware of that. I mean, I've really had to learn how to bite my tongue or hold back of what it's natural to judge anything. It's natural to consciousness. That's part of Saturn. It's how we learn. It's how we know what's true for us. It does connect to the search really for your own meaning or truth with Saturn. With Saturn in Pisces. Sorry about that. I got a message there I was trying to catch. But anyway, so Saturn in Pisces, it can be tricky because nobody likes to experience judgment from others. And so Saturn in Pisces, when it comes back toward that person too, it can be a difficult pill to swallow. It's so perfect with Pisces, isn't it? So anyway, yeah, I can tell you, I can speak from experience. I've been quick to judge, and everybody's own journey is their own, and we can have an opinion about it, and that's natural, right? But it's important to be able to, stay in your own lane. So before we bring Ari on. The last thing I wanted to say about Deva, the way you closed, you said it's a detox of what's been excessive, or the detox of the excess, bringing us closer to what is pure or God. So I love that too. And Pisces, it is elimination of all that is superficial, right? Or does not really hold ultimate meaning for you. Like if you're in a relationship and you're not experiencing that connection or that closeness or the compassion, the sensitivity. So it would be a detoxification of all that doesn't promote what is pure in your experience within your own inner relationship to yourself and your relationship to others. So thank you. Yeah.
Which is a form of supreme giving. Which is
yes. Oh, wow. So, right. So Jeffrey taught, by appearing not to give at times, you are practicing the art of supreme giving, helping another help themselves. Right. Okay. Finally, oh my goodness. So we're just filling in for Patricia. Deva covered Venus, and Ari, please cover Neptune and Pisces and your other planets.
Okay, hi everyone. I'll start with Mars. We know that Mars, what's that?
Can you start? It's okay, go ahead.
Start with Neptune? I'll start with Neptune. Okay.
Yeah.
The experience of disorientation is, as Marty beautifully spoke about, a part of the journey of realigning our consciousness back to source, because we come into this world as expressed by the mutable cross with all kinds of beliefs and concepts and constructs. And at the core, these constructs and beliefs are, from a Piscean 12th house point of view, a way of staying protected and safe from true surrender. And the idea of surrender is something that self-concept and identity can't control. So the 12th house is opposite Virgo, which is the epitome of what we can control, what we can actually meddle with and improve and work on. And then we have all of our beliefs and our concepts in the 3rd and 9th house, things that we can identify or understand or learn about or experience directly. And in the 12th house, there's a realm where all of what we know, all of what we can do, all of who we think we are, all that we've built, it has no inherent meaning or value. So a part of the experience with Neptune in the 12th house or Pisces can be this ultimate sense of disorientation and confusion. And I want to offer that, kind of piggybacking on what's been spoken. The purpose of disorientation is to bring the ego consciousness back to a place of humility, where the soul recognizes, okay, I can't control the ocean, and also I can't be the one to decide what the meaning of all of this is. We're constantly seeking and trying to grab onto something that provides a sense of meaning. And this need to find meaning is a way of maintaining a sense of security, but it's still holding on to a way of interpreting or giving context to life. And the truth of reality, the truth of love, the truth of this indiscriminate compassion, which is also dispassionate, also neutral, also not as concerned with the ideas of love and meaning and value that we've placed on ourselves and one another. Actually coming into alignment with that, there's often this experience of total confusion. Now, Stacy once said something so beautiful many, many years ago. It really, this was like in 2010 on the message board. Like, this landed my understanding on a deeper way of the Pisces archetype. And this is not an exact quote. Had I thought about this, I would have prepared, but I just thought of it now. That there's oftentimes this experience with this archetype of an undefinable period of time of enduring a particular quality of experience or phase of life where things seem to not change. So there's a sort of bleh that is just manifest in your life, in your relationships, your job, it just, things feel mundane. And so a very common experience with this archetype, but in particular, the Neptune, the soul can go into this extreme of life has total meaninglessness. And it really brings out this, actually, it can be a hard existential quality of experiencing what's mundane. Like, just the energy of mundane is actually a sort of like horrid fearful experience, because if you think about it, it's either God is real or not. And we have that differentiation between the holiness, the sacred, and what isn't. And so everything can just be mundane. And that's like, everything is Earl Grey. Everything is cloudy. Everything is sort of like, eh. And so there's no feeling there. That's why you can be this amazing musician. And we know that you can become an icon, 12th house. You can become an instrument and be like water and flow and speak to the masses and be an instrument for something much greater than yourself. But it can all become, there's a story of this famous musician that won this contest and started touring with his band, and it was his dream life. And he got to a point where this life that was just it's everything he wanted, the fame, the recognition, I don't know, maybe the drugs, maybe the women, I'm not sure about that part, but this is sort of an archetypal experience that we all go through, whether or not we've landed the dream band. And it gets to a point where it's not interesting anymore. There's that sense of excitement and inspiration. This is always what I've wanted. I've got this relationship, or I've landed this experience, this way of being in life, and everything used to be magical. The honeymoon, there were miracles. I would, have visions of Krishna, and God would talk to me directly through the clouds. And now it's like everything's just sort of eggs in the morning, and I don't feel. And that's so important, the holiness of that experience. And there's a framework that I want to offer. The experience of bleh, the experience of absolute mundanity and an indefinable, unquantifiable, indefinite period of things just not moving. Stacie wrote, it's like a car being asked to drive, but there's no fuel in it. And coming to terms with that deep sense of there's nothing, there's no motivation, there's no drive. All of our dreams, everything that we believed in, everything that gave us meaning, we can't fake it anymore. It's like not there anymore. And so the disorientation, this disillusionment brings ego consciousness down to a pulp. And so the soul is left with nothing other than to turn to the only place where meaning is. And that's what is true. That is the true nature of source. That is the true nature of love. That is, we didn't create ourselves. We didn't create what we are. We didn't create God. We didn't create reality. It's actually turning towards the truth of what all of this is. And there's sort of like a plan, not in a linear sense, but everything in life is wired to know itself and to come back home. And so from the point of view of the oneness, all of oneness is in this evolutionary journey of coming back home to itself. And so everyone plays a role. Every part of the wholeness has a purpose, and that purpose is not designated by that part. It's designated by the source of all creation. So in this place of surrender, through the disorientation and confusion, there's this possibility of everything switching. And you're probably quoting Jeff Green, I think, in this statement of, it can be like a flicking of a light bulb or a snap of a finger. Everything can change in a moment. And this is also where the teaching of prayer comes in. I just want to share something that I'm learning right now on my own journey. I found myself praying one day and saying, okay, Source Creator, I'm praying, and yet I know everything's already provided. There's nothing lacking, and all that's needed is given. And so what am I asking for? And it's sort of this experience of like the prayer. Closing thoughts. Well, no.
No, you got more time.
Got 2 more planets.
You're fine.
I'm in prayer. So it's like this experience of the wave turning to the ocean. It's like, hello, you're already a part of the ocean. But it's like that process of giving ourselves over and letting go of the illusion of thinking that we're separate. It's sort of like this dance towards some sort of consummation. It's like we're in this courting of union, and the prayer is this way of ever approaching that. And I feel like there's a space in our surrender and our attunement where source can come through and anything can happen. Like anything is possible in that space. That's what Pisces is. It's like time and space and form aren't primary to reality. And so you look at the infinite void from which all things come, anything could happen here. And that's, of course, where the imagination is so essential, because it reflects the idea that anything is inherently possible from the point of view of the source of all things. It's incomprehensible. Okay, let's move on to Mars and then Uranus. Okay. Mars, of course, reflects a natural semi-sextile between the Pisces and the Aries archetype. So we're looking at the individuating aspect in terms of our own desires, how we're consciously making choices and thus saying, I want this, I'm doing this. And this is how we are engaging consciously with our life purpose and being able to engage a sense of will. And from the point of view of absolute consciousness, this is about allowing the individual will to become an agent and an instrument of the source of all things. And so the learning here is becoming a spiritual agent, a spiritual activist, learning that one's capacity to fight, one's capacity to act, to assert, has no meaning in and of itself. So Mars in the 12th or Pisces, that part of what we learn with all things in that house is nothing has meaning on its own, unless we are letting it be defined and used by the source of all meaning. And that's where we can have two possibilities. One, a soul that becomes a very famous underwater sea diver, a world athlete, and they become an icon or someone really powerful, or someone that feels like, I don't know how to use that masculine Mars drive energy. I feel so small, a grain of sand in the ocean, on the beach. My personal actions, my personal will has no consequence. Maybe I'm bullied. Maybe what I try to do falls up short, and I feel like the waves of reality are just not letting me get what I want. And so that journey of realigning the will can really go to these extremes of, at some point, a person just feels helpless and futile, but we could also have that individual where their Mars function becomes this universal symbol. But then that can go in a second too. Everything can come and go so quickly here. And so the ongoing journey of realignment is learning how to use that as an instrument, because the ability to act, Mars in its essence is that self-cleaning oven. The core of it is we're acting, but to move through the life journey. We do it, we move through life experience, we grow, we evolve, we move on. So it's letting ourselves be used and ultimately bringing our desire nature in clear alignment, clear attunement to the source of all things, and letting ourselves be an expression of that. That's very much in a nutshell. With Uranus in the 12th house or Pisces, we're speaking to the aspect of consciousness that pertains to our essential individuality, who we are according to our soul essence. And so here there's a deep interest in separating from the illusions of the world. It's kind of like this realization that everything's a tarot card. Everything's an objective archetypal symbol. It's a dream symbol. And so there can be this profound sense of, on the one hand, detachment in this pure quality of awareness and seeing everything in an impersonal way. And this can express itself, if there's trauma, in the way of actually being outside of one's body, being sort of dissociated, where you're witnessing even horrible, traumatic things. And that's often been the case of group trauma or things that are happening that are sort of representing the apex of human suffering, but sort of just witnessing it as an observer, because there's a sort of detachment from the dream of reality. In a positive sense, this can represent the true quality of spiritual liberation and awakening in more of the Zen Buddhist understanding of awakening, of becoming a pure observer, pure consciousness. You're sitting in meditation. You take no personal concern or identification with the symbols that arise. You see everything as a passing of Maya, and you recognize that the entire reality, this is the Uranus teaching, is represented inside of ourselves, that the entire community of life is actually inside. So all of the characters that we see in our life are just components of our own psyche, universal archetypes that are fractally manifest within and without. So we can have this experience of liberating from the need to embellish a story and thus giving personal identity to the things of reality by remaining fundamentally detached and thus liberating from context. Thus we see creation as it is from the mind of God. The trauma can also just really express as feeling this deep sense of depression, disconnect, not eating, not being involved in life. This deep sense of numbness, 12th house meaninglessness, Uranus, I don't really fit in or belong anywhere. But the other end of that, if there's a relationship to surrender, that desire to know the truth, to know reality, is to get I'm closing up, is to get beyond the numbness. You know what's interesting about the 12th house Pisces numbness is that's also a sensation. Right? So it's a very fascinating thing. It's like there's a point of surrender there because it's not the truth. Like numbness and disconnect isn't what happens when you bottom out and there's nothing left but God. It's actually a veil between you and God. So it's a thing. There's a content there. And we can identify, like, oh, I'm identifying this as numbness. I'm identifying this as dissociation, disconnect. Although Patricia Walsh often said, with a lot of her regression work, and I find this to be true as well, you don't really know that you're dissociated until you're not anymore. It's like, holy shit, I wasn't in my body. I was just kind of checked out. But with self-reflection, and oftentimes in the Uranian way, we can kind of go from the outside in. We can kind of look at the symbols, look at the dynamics, look at the archetypes, look at the messages that are repeating, and just sort of be like, I kind of feel like maybe I'm not really here. I'm not really involved. Someone just tortured me and I felt no pain, or I just lost everything and I don't really care. Do I feel happy? Like there's a sort of like, what's really going on here? And so there can be this sort of this searching of actually uncovering a lot of suppressed content, which can open up a really deep journey. Okay, I'll close it there.
Thank you, Ari. Yeah, it's funny that you brought up that quote that I made about the Piscean process of when you start to lose meaning, just nothing means anything. Nothing does. You can't find it anywhere. And it's like, you know that you've got to keep going, but there's no gas in the tank there. So how do you go? And one of the really incredible things about Pisces is that the way it works is it happens of itself. It's not in control of the ego. It just manifests when it's time. And then you find, dots are connected that weren't connected before, and there's meaning where there wasn't, and you just couldn't plan it out. It's just something that is bestowed on you and that really emerges from the soul. And so it's an excruciating process. I wrote all that when I was in the throes of it. But it really does. It gives rise to something new, but it's uncomfortable. And just to synthesize kind of what Marty was saying, just be, you don't need to know, just be. And that is the best advice that I can think of while going through that process.
So Ari, I loved, of course, everything you shared as well. And I have a question for you, so you can turn on your mic again. Is he there? Ari?
Yeah, I was just copying Stacy's quote, putting it in the chat box. In the chat box, if you want to see the quote. Yeah, go for it.
When one's inner sense of ultimate meaning has seemingly been severed and no longer
transferring.
Also make me realize I spelled your name wrong in my book. I have to fix that.
Oh, it's okay.
Yeah.
Kirsten.
That happens a lot, right?
Christian, I get it all. I love that one, Christian. When I was raised with all this religion, I'm like, yo, no, wait. Anyway, I'm a believer, just not a, one of those strict ones. So at the very beginning, Ari, you were talking about disorientation as it connects to Pisces and 12th house and Neptune. And again, I probably can't even say this enough. When you hear the word natural astrology, you immediately think it's something that feels good, right? Because it's natural, right? So even though we're talking about these archetypes and how they're expressed naturally, they can be excruciating, right? If you're at a place in your journey where you're needing to see the light or see the truth of something, and with the Pisces energy, every time feels like the first time when you've been hurt. It's almost like it's never happened before. So when it does, there's just such a natural innocence about this archetype. And you said, Ari, that the disorientation is necessary because it ultimately, I need your help because I wanted to remember what you said here, but it leads to a humility that allows you to evolve. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Sure. Disorientation means the existing orientation has been dissed, and that's necessary for reorientation. So whatever we've oriented towards, meaning whatever we've given meaning and purpose, is just in the end revealed to be a deck of cards. And it can be, what's funny about that too is like we will make certain things really small and certain things really big. But you watch a child and like how intensely painful it is for a toy to be taken away. From the point of view of an adult, it's like, oh, it's not a big deal. But from the point of view of God, these are all just little games that our mind is playing. We're like, oh, this is the toy that I need. And maybe it's a relationship, maybe it's a marriage, maybe it's whatever. But it's all just these illusions of meaning and purpose that we've associated. That means we think it defines who we are. And so disorientation is, I was here with you, this is what my life was. This is what I was doing. This is where all the love, meaning, joy, purpose, connection was. And now it's not here. So it's like we've grabbed onto something and we're just there with it. I mean, the whole Pisces 12th house issue is it's an ultimate sense of belonging, like an existential sense of ultimate belonging, ultimate peace, ultimate security, because we are home. There's safety in the ocean. There's safety in the oneness. And then for that to be taken away, I think Jeffrey Wolfe Green said disillusionment is one of the most painful things a soul could ever experience. And so disorientation and the archetype of confusion, I feel like, are sort of a subset of disillusionment. It's like, what are we orienting towards? I think there's a lot of emotion, maybe even grieving, maybe even anger, maybe even hurt, and just all the things that might be necessary to acknowledge and feel before we can surrender and be humbled.
Yeah, I'm remembering a story, and maybe Deva can help me with this, but if someone has a strong Pisces influence, in his case, Pisces moon in the 4th, I remember him sharing about having this special stuffy, and I don't remember what it was, a bunny or something. And I had a similar experience of my blanket being taken away before I wanted it to be. And I never to be found again. And his was taken away at an age, that little stuffy was everything, right? Like you were saying to this child, it's all relative. That toy that was taken away is their world. And so when the stuffy's taken away and it's your one source of comfort or security, that this is a Cancer teaching, being thrown back on yourself. You can't cling to that stuffy. You have to find a place within yourself to try and comfort and nurture, that inner space. And so I love that you brought that up, because it's so true at every, it doesn't matter what age. And if someone has a Pisces moon, like, Stacie, I'm sure you can reflect back, or, we're all sensitive in our own ways, but to go back in your life and think about the different experiences that you had where you were either thrown back on yourself or experienced that disillusionment, like you talked about, Ari, or being hurt and it feeling like the first time every time. And there's such a high degree of sensitivity with Pisces. It's just, it feels more than any archetype.
And I have to say this, so the 7-year-old that I'm living with knows that I don't believe in Santa. I grew up Jewish. I've never met him. He's never given me gifts. I have no reason to believe in Santa, but I'm not telling him. I'm like, you figure it out for yourself. But as he's getting older, he's like, why don't you believe in Santa? And he once said, I really want to know that I really need him to exist. And I'm like, oh, he wants me to stay up with him so he can see him when he comes and drinks the milk and all that stuff. And But that's like the innocence of that. I'm posting a comment in the chat box of a Saturday Night Live video that is just hilarious and really speaks that disillusionment quality that we're speaking to here.
Cool.
Everyone has to watch it. It's really funny.
Okay. All right. So I want to keep talking about all this with you, Ari, and everyone else. We've got to keep moving forward, I suppose, because our boss, we might get in trouble with the boss. But anyway, so let's move to our next guest, and this will close our webinar today. The wonderful, the beautiful Helena Garcia. Welcome back.
I'm just going to repeat all that you have said. I was thinking I am the last. I have a son in Pisces, and I am the last. And what I've written, it's almost like I have a little part of everything that you all said. So it's fun. And I'm going to repeat what Ari said about Stacy, because I didn't know Stacy had the moon in Pisces. I'll be speaking about the moon and sun. And the first person I thought when I thought about what I was going to say was what Stacy wrote in the it is compiled in the glossary, the EA glossary. And everything, I think everything that Stacy wrote is one of the most things that stuck into me relative to Pisces. So I hope what I have to say about the moon, it's just a little can go in that direction. But I also want to start with the follow-up from your Sagittarius panel, because you talked about the last documentary from David Attenborough, and I went to see it, and he has a Mars in Pisces, and some charts give him a moon in Pisces also, and I think it's correct, but we don't have a birth time. But he says, in this world, a species can only thrive when everything else around us thrives too. If we take care of nature, nature will take care of us. And so for me, this captures the true essence of Pisces, in that there is, with the natural expression of the archetype, an underlying desire, wish, or sometimes a very idealistic expectation, almost an intrinsic Piscean rule of law, that this is the way it would be natural for us to function as a society and as individuals, and how we should relate to ourselves and one another. And that each existence is a fundamental aspect of a universal body that is thriving, that ultimately being a true part of nature is being part of source and creation, when and especially because no one is left out. So Pisces is always walking this fine line between what's ideal and what's reality, between desire, hope, and expectation that life will represent or be in actuality some sort of projection of our highest ideals, when the reality is much more about what is actually possible in a world where everyone has its own reasons and desires and realities. So integrating this simplest Virgo truth that the only real way we can all thrive simultaneously implies a certain degree of imperfection and an ultimate form of divine discontent that always comes with Pisces in the human form. Because the conditional nature of reality means each of us carries cycles within cycles that are constantly combining and interacting, and where empathy can ultimately prevail when hope and ideals fail. And there is another fundamental aspect for me to Pisces that I think unveils much of the usual fog that we have when we encounter these Pisces placements. And that Einstein, who had the sun in Pisces, creatively expressed so well in his theory of relativity, in that to Pisces, everything is in relation to a multitude of things, that there is no separation and only a matter of perspective. And mostly that there's a natural inability to disconnect things from one another. So for Pisces, it is not a matter of opinion or idea, but we actually can feel this. We have this feeling and inner knowing that can sometimes give away when there is a blur. There's a blurred distinction between self and when there is no distinction between self and others, this can give away to insecurity and a weak self-image, because the ability and capacity to see others and everyone's point of view puts the point of view of the soul in equal measure, to an extent that the soul can give away its own center or point of view, or this sometimes can create an unequal measure of our point of view, giving to what is known as the extreme masochistic or sadistic expressions of the Virgo Pisces axis. And this, in my view, and I'll go with the sun, is the basis for the sun in Pisces being in a natural inconjunct, and why there is a crisis for sun in Pisces when it comes to creative self-actualization. With the sun in Pisces, the real soul desire is to align with the spiritual or transcendental practice guiding any effort the soul does for its own self-actualization, be it religion, art, or spiritual practice, depending on the evolutionary stage one is in, that could give life meaning and purpose in a way that the focus is not a spotlight on the self, but the relationship with the practice and the amazing gifts that actually arise naturally from it. So the crisis usually is taking place as long as we maintain an unhealthy relationship with one's ability to shine and align with a higher purpose, be it having talents that we don't develop, a natural tendency to sacrifice for others and do nothing for oneself, like being in the shadow of something or someone, an idea, a person that we can consider godlike, or the opposite, as having a deluded sense of self-importance, where the person can see themselves as de facto gods and goddesses, or others seeing them that way, and the light always pointing to themselves and their outwardly achievements. So in the same way that the following sign, Aries, is itself and nothing else, for Pisces, the self can be a conclusion of a long cycle where identity, self-image, and perspective comes out of a multitude of layers that these cycles carry through. So for me, one of the simplest ways to understand the Pisces archetype is, as you've all been mentioning in this hour, is to accept an identity relative to each of these planets we have in Pisces, or the 12th, that has a unique time within time. It's where usually the soul will take the amount of time needed to finish something or create space for something new to arise further along. Sometimes this can look like infinite time, where the idea of ending could also be usually avoided because of the natural human fear of the new, the insecurity in the void and the unknown that will come next. But also, I think this is a very important aspect, that the same ending will imply an ending of how we relate with an idea, person, or dynamic that shape our sense of security, but can also function in a distorted form as a reason to avoid the necessary endings of the cycles we face with the displacement of parts of the soul viewed as dependent of something or someone else externally other than the source itself. So I have come to the conclusion from observation that instead of the usual tendency to look at the Piscean placements as a source of weakness, lack of decisiveness, or insecurities that could actually turn into an unnatural form of self-shaming or victimization, is very useful to try to understand why is it that one has not yet ended or followed a certain path or idea or a relationship or taken a decisive direction? Why is that? And because the truth, when it comes to the 12th house or Pisces placements, this truth might be that the time was not right, the time is long past, or the time is yet to come. So the challenge being to look at one's life with so much honesty as possible and ask and know, and ask here, it could be ask source, put the question out there and know which one is which in our story, and to give up when it's time to give up, what is not in alignment with the soul purpose and keep up with the effort when the time has not yet come for what it is, can give a true acceptance and appreciation of the present moment as nothing but what is, or as Marty said, be in the moment, or I don't know, I don't remember exactly. Where life has meaning and purpose at all times, no matter what happens, or as people say, and enjoy the process stance in life. This is what gets Pisces to go through. One good example is the now president-elect of the United States, with many planets in the 12th house, including the sun. He also has the South Node in Pisces. And he tried to be president for 3 times. And by the time he actually did it, he was not even going to try. So, but something higher called, and all he had to do was to answer. So this is for me the very essence of Pisces and the balsamic face, that one does not necessarily know the answers to many of our life questions, but that one knows to be part of the rhythm of life to such an extent that it can ultimately trust and have faith in the cycles of life, death, and rebirth. So especially for the moon, and having this in mind, I think it's absolutely no coincidence, as you have mentioned in previous panels, that both Sri Yukteswar, Yogananda, and Jeffrey Wolfe Green have either moon in Pisces or the 12th house. What seems to be true is that for souls in the final evolutionary states, the egocentric identity is ultimately centered in the source, and the soul has certainly come a long way to be where it is. So for most souls with the moon in Pisces, all can touch the divine in their own way and according to their own evolution, but all will be able to feel how others feel, and to some extent this capacity to feel what animals and nature, and aligning with their conscience and communicating with them. And with the natural Cancer Pisces trine, many with this planetary position can effortlessly walk in other shoes, as in osmosing the environment around, having as well the need for self-protection and time out alone and in nature, possibly to recharge or just be with oneself, and not constantly taking in others' energy and needs, to a point the soul loses touch with its own center. Ultimately, many souls with the moon in Pisces will have the need to complete and finish a series of life cycles where they have been desiring to serve the source or a higher call. As they do, they will serve others, even if this takes some form of personal sacrifice for a higher cause, where their service, big or small, is their way of thriving, where others also thrive, embodying the highest laws of nature. So this would be my thoughts on this one.
Thank you, Helena.
Thank you, Stacy.
I do appreciate you bringing up the masochism versus sadism dynamic, because that is something that can certainly be in the forefront with Pisces relative to this right standard of conduct and religious conditioning, and we are in a culture that is truly distorted. We are not in a consensus state where we're looking beyond the just consensus norms. I said that completely wrong, but did it translate?
Yeah,
No,
definitely.
Anyway, but part of this, because there are many souls who come in with Pisces energy who will come in with just a general sense of feeling victimized by life. And that is the product of feeling that they have no power or control in their life, which is, it's simply an orientation to Pisces. It's all about the orientation. You have to surrender. One of the things Pisces souls are learning is just to surrender to the unknown, and when that occurs, what is allowed for is great inspiration, and suddenly clarity, clarity is there when it's been missing for so long, and all the answers or all the questions are answered for, relative to some orientation. And so, yeah. Sorry.
Yes,
Hey, Helena, I have two things. One is, can you please share that quote again about something's not, there were three options, and the last one, it's about the need to be patient, that the time has not yet come. What was that?
Sorry, I'm trying to.
It's what they're learning about patience or surrender, but it was about time, like.
No, what I said is that it is very, I think it was this part, that it was very useful to try to understand why some things have not yet ended. Because, sorry, no, it's not. The truth is that might not be, the time is not right, the time is long past, or the time is yet to come. Was this?
The time is long past, right? It's like this teaching about standing on a train, right? A train station, standing at the train station and waiting for the train to come by. And if you think about transits that have many passes, like your outer planets, Pluto, Neptune, Uranus, Saturn, back and forth, and they come back, the train stops and the doors open, and you have a chance to get on the train, right? So when you talk about the time that's long past, I mean, the way that someone might be able to experience this is if they didn't get on the train when they had the chance, and they were at the age, or they had the means, or they had the body, the physical body to be able to do something. And that is a hard thing to look back on your life and have regret that you didn't get on the train. But so this is something that I talk to a lot of clients about, especially when they're in the midst of some very big transits, that, I'm not saying this, that you can never get on the train, that will be your last chance, but you might have to run and sprint and jump on the back in order to get on it. Like, don't make it hard on yourself, like if the doors open, step in there, step on that train. So, I mean, I think it's important too, because about timing and learning that timing is everything, and that we can't force it. It's like, you don't want to, before those grapes are ripe on the vine, you don't want to prune them, and then you'll be tasting something very bitter, right? So the time on the vine, whatever it is that the soul is waiting for, we want it to be sweet. We want it to be supple. We want it to be everything that it can be.
I think I came to this conclusion that there's always this feeling with Pisces that the present moment does not have it what you want, or it's past, or it's forward, but it's not. When you see Pisces, if it didn't happen and you still have the desire to do it, you will at some point. Or if you don't, probably it's something that it was a train you didn't want to go in, and you now can have the experience to say, well, thank God I didn't enter that train.
Exactly. And the last thing I just like to validate, and I think it's a perfect way to close this 12 webinar series is that you spoke about as the soul evolves and what that Pisces archetype looks like, in particular the moon, when it's in a very evolved state. You spoke of the similarities between Yogananda, Yukastra, I think both of them, right? And of course, Jeffrey Wolfe Green and Jesus had many planets in Pisces as well. And what that looks like, it looks like being able to feel everything, being able to feel what the animals feel, being able to feel what somebody in front of them feels, being able to feel what the collective is feeling. And that is so true. There is a an energy of self-sacrifice that is required at the last stage of evolution in the spiritual state. It is a Pisces, Neptune, 12th house experience every single day. And they feel things they don't want to be feeling. They feel things that they can't turn off if they tried. And it does get harder as you go. So anyway, I've experienced that, and I've heard it's true for people that are much further along than I am. So I really wanted to thank you for, just reminding people of, it's an archetype once you get deeper deeper along on that journey. And my mom used to say that God never gives us anything we can't handle. And I feel that, every step of our own, every footprint, every step of our own evolution, we do gain more spiritual muscle and more inner strength in order to sustain what you must, in order to extend our hand down the mountain for others, and in order to continue pressing on for ourselves until we can merge back. So,
Can I add one more thing?
yes, please do.
I just kind of want to leave my little imprint here, which is that, as we've been talking about, Pisces can be just a really, it's a tough lesson sometimes to really let go and to trust into something that you can't quantify. But, relative to the sun in Pisces, one thing we have to remember is that Pisces also correlates to rewards. Culmination correlates with rewards. And someone who puts their soul into that process and allows themselves to just be, as we've been talking about, they can learn what instrument the source is attempting to play through them. And it's complete inspiration, and it doesn't just help the self, it helps others. So there is a reward at the end of this.
Yeah, one aspect we didn't actually touch, I think, is one of miracles, and they do happen with Pisces. And well, it's unexpected. It's when it has to happen, but it's an aspect that it's very important to remember with Pisces, I think.
All right. Well, so we're going to have our final piece of music by Ari Moshe Wolfe. To the Ocean I Go.
All right. Can you see me?
Yes.
Oh, for real. Let me flip this. Oh. Phone has better audio than the computer when I'm not with my equipment. Okay. Is the guitar clear?
Yes.
All right. To the ocean I go. Into the ocean I go. To the ocean I go. Into the ocean I go. To the ocean I go. Into the ocean I go. To the ocean I go. Into the ocean I go. The ocean of love, forgiveness and wholeness, the ocean of now. The ocean of love, forgiveness and wholeness, the ocean of now. To the ocean I go. Into the ocean
I go. Into the ocean I go. Jump in the waters and play with the dolphins. Remember your innocence, return to the one. Jump in the waters and play with the children. Remember your innocence, return to the one. Himala haaretz, Dea es Hashem, Kimayim layam, Liyam mechasim. Himala haaretz, Dea es Hashem, Kimayim layam, Liyam mechasim. The ocean of love, forgiveness and wholeness, the ocean of now. The ocean of love, forgiveness and wholeness, the ocean of now. To the ocean I go. Into the ocean I go. To the ocean I go. Into the ocean I go. To the ocean I go. Into the ocean I go. To the ocean I go. Into the ocean I go.
Mhm. Mm.
Thank you, Ari. Oh, I have such your music is such a gift. I mean, you've touched my life directly in that way for sure. My time singing with you have been, I don't know, just those special little moments in time where I truly felt such a transcendent communion, and you offer that to all of us. So thank you for that.
So grateful to do so. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Ari. And thank you, everybody, all of our awesome panel today. It was just exceptional. I just felt all of you. And thank you to all our volunteers. You want to do the honors?
Annie Cotto, Emma Sadardi, Evenia, Jen Cashin, Jennifer Cobb, Jonas Rahman, I think I said that right, Julia Beanie, Corey Clement, Lisa Machina, Linda Johnson, Mara Tharwat, Matt Dragonstone, Monica Bravo, Neville S. Drake, Nicole Ines Harnish, Nix Montoqueros, Rachel Talia, Sarah DeHaven, Shelley Brown. And here's our surprise.
Oh my goodness.
We literally had Linda put it this way, it's a stellium of stars.
Oh.
I mean, look at all of these birthdays that are just right here in this little cluster here, all of these special souls, all of these wise teachers, Sagittarius.
Oh, wow.
So happy birthday to all of you. You're so special.
Oh, that was a surprise. Is Deva still here?
I don't know if she is, but we'll
Okay.
tell her.
Thank you very much. That's so sweet. That was a lot at once. Look at that.
I know. Incredible.
So for those of you that are listening, these are our speakers from the series, and we are compiling a book on natural astrology that is essentially all the webinars. We're going to edit it nicely so you can read it with in a way that's hopefully beautifully edited and put together in one book so you can refer back to all the planets and all the signs and houses. A nice reference. And so we are very much looking forward to finishing this, compiling this. And so thank you everybody who is on this journey with us, and bless you all for those who have the courage to take on your own growth and evolution and help others along the way. So we have a new talk show coming, also more to share about that in 2021. So we'll let you know more about it as we finish some of the details on that. And for those of you who are interested in becoming a student of evolutionary astrology, you can go to the schoolof-evolutionaryastrology.com. And there's a correspondence course there. It was the original course taught by the founder of EA, Jeff Green, in early 1990s. And there's a 27 DVD series where you can become certified as well. So check it out if you don't know about that already. Until next time, namaste.
Namaste.